This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
It's that time of year. It's like Valentine's Day. And I even thought like maybe we'll just do like a Valentine's Day 14, but I really wasn't up for that level of research and content consumption. So you mentioned something I want to talk about briefly. And what you mentioned was you watched a documentary that I then followed and watched, The Tinder Swindler.
Right. I typically skip over those types of shows or whatever. I think it's just one like sort of movie length documentary as opposed to like a docuseries, I think. But it's been a couple days now since I watched it. But so at first I typically am like, obviously there are spoilers in this. If you're planning on watching Tinder Swindler and you don't want it to be ruined, then don't listen. But it's a story about a guy who he pretends that he's a diamond prince. This
is an Israeli man named Shimon Hayat, and the way he presented himself, was it a diamond mogul? Is that what he was the son of a diamond mogul?
Right, so he would be a prince of diamonds.
Prince of Diamonds. And he used the name Simon Lviv. That's the idea. What he was doing was using Tinder to basically, is it a Ponzi scheme? Is that what this is in a way?
I mean, yes, in a way it is. I wouldn't necessarily call it a Ponzi scheme. As far as there's so much more at stake here than just money because, in a Ponzi scheme, you're basically lining up investors, and the way that investors get paid back and continue investing in whatever it is you're having them invest in is by you get new investors and you pay them back with the money that you've gotten from the new investors, right? And so this guy, he's going on Tinder and meeting women, and he's playing a long con basically on them. And so he demonstrates that he's very well off before something like catastrophic happens and he needs to borrow money.
Right.
And so it's at first I was just sort of like, oh, come on, don't give money to somebody you met on Tinder and you've known for a month, right? But he ends up being very convincing, right? So he's in 0 to 60, he's saying, oh, I love you, you're my soulmate, I want to marry you, to multiple women at a time. And, I cringe at it. It's sort of it's not really like it, but the Dirty John story, he was really just sort of doing that with the one specific woman who brought it forward. But this guy was completely ruining these girls' lives, and they trusted him. And the documentary is very interesting because it's, for one thing, it's interesting how they were able to make a documentary out of what they made it out of, because it's snippets of, different things on social media, different things on messaging back and forth on WhatsApp or however they were communicating. And they put it all together to tell this story.
It almost unfolds in real time in some segments.
It does. And I'm always fascinated by that. I don't have the attention span to do that kind of thing, unfortunately. But to watch this guy he he's something. He's definitely something, because he actually starts when it starts unraveling, and they realize, the girls realize, like, they're not going to get money back, and they stop helping him. He starts losing his temper and making threats against them. I
Yeah.
don't know if you noticed that, but I was like, what is he thinking? Like, and how is it? For one thing, so this guy, he is getting women to take out lines of credit on their houses and, like, just huge amounts of money. And they're doing it because they have been seeing this guy that they met on Tinder for a month, 6 weeks, whatever. They trust him. He's earned trust by showing them that, like, he is really well off. They go on private planes everywhere, and, like, so it's a long con because he's using other people's money to bait them into giving him money that he will then turn around and use on other people.
That's the part I thought was a little bit similar in concept to a Ponzi scheme.
It is, absolutely. The difference to me is, like, a Ponzi scheme traditionally, it doesn't, like, involve telling someone you love them.
Yeah.
And so there's more at stake in this sort of romantic Ponzi scheme. Now, it got interesting to me because at some point, he does get caught. 3 of the women he did this to, they bring him down. But all they arrest him on is flying with a false documentation.
Yeah, basically a fake ID. He has a fake passport.
Right. And so, these women, he doesn't get arrested for any of the fraud. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, it is completely wrong. Okay. But I don't know how much of a crime that really is, because they are, like, willingly giving him the money.
That is where I got sort of sucked into this part. Is this guy is skimming on what I would call the edge of legal. He's not ethical. Like, this is completely unethical, but because of how sprawling this is, and this is, like, what was one of the most amazing things about this documentary is it is a globe-trotting world adventure. You are all over the place. It's a British documentary talking about American trends, but we're seeing Norway and Sweden and Israel. This is a fascinating way to look at these types of scams. So I went digging a little bit. How much money do you think Americans in 2022, now I'm focusing on Americans, how much money do you think they will lose to romance scams?
Like, total?
Yeah. The estimate is $800 million will be suckered from Americans in the year 2022, slightly up from 2021. But people fall for this left, right, and center. And one of the most fascinating things about this is this guy, like, now I noticed today that, first of all, the 3 women from the documentary, they have put up a GoFundMe. Their names are Cecilia, Eileen, and Pania, and they're from different places, but they have put up a GoFundMe basically trying to raise the money back to cover about $600,000 worth of the damage this guy did. But authorities estimate that roughly, and this, if you want to look this up, you can look up Comparatech. It's an online security website that breaks down crime statistics related. They did a bunch of crime statistics related to, like, the COVID pandemic and all the scams that were going around then. They're estimating there'll be a 59% increase in the number of romance scams by the end of this year compared to last year. And their website, their name is spelled COMPARITECH. And they talk about, like, different ways that you can not get sucked into something like this. And I think a lot of people look at this stuff and they go, I would never do that. But these women genuinely believed that they had been having a relationship for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months with this guy who had proven himself in some ways, although the Ponzi scheme allowed him to basically use one woman's money, like you described, to pay for the stuff for other women. It's created sort of this subgenre of true crime because it's not quite a crime.
Right. And so it's wrong. I have absolutely no problem talking about him being in the wrong with what he's doing is slimy. Okay. Now, am I going to donate to a GoFundMe to help women pay back money that they gave to their boyfriend?
No.
Well, no, I'm not. And honestly, I don't think anybody else should either. And I hate to feel
I think
that.
the filmmaker should have helped him out.
Well, and, just to point out, like, this guy hasn't been charged with a crime. Okay. As far as that goes, as far as the fraud goes. And, I'm thinking to myself, because at the end, they talk about the aftermath, basically, like, oh, he spent this much time in jail for what he did it was the identity, the passport being a different identity. And, charges have never been brought against him in the fraud cases. Well, that's because he didn't really do anything illegal. It's wrong, right? But if you convince somebody to, get secured lines of credit, which essentially is what was happening, they were getting, they were increasing their credit card limits. They were getting lines of credit on their houses. Now, the thing that really irked me was he was throwing this money away.
Yeah, this money was being used to party and jet set. That's really, and own the other women.
Right. And it's disgusting, right? And he is like, I do think that everybody out there needs to be aware of this guy, like, and, take it for what it's worth, right? Because he shouldn't, like, just the whole idea that he's like this really special dude, that, he's the Prince of Diamonds, and like, what's really happening is he's conning women into, like, he's ruining their lives, basically.
Absolutely. He is ruining these people's lives. Not only that, here's what was the most disturbing part about the documentary. And I think you picked up on this, but I don't know. It always fascinates me when I'm watching something like this, and I'm watching in this case, the villain is the Simon character, and like he has different names. He's actually done jail time for different crimes. But did you notice who was committing the crimes?
The women.
He gets these women to commit financial fraud and wire fraud. They are literally lying. Okay, so there's a couple of different takes in this. And again, if you're still listening and you don't want it to be spoiled, I'm about to wreck some of it for you. But he fakes documents or convinces them that he's going to hire them on with his family and his company, and he gives them documents. Now, when he gives them to them, the documents are just bullshit. And he does this with proof of a wire transfer. He does it with proof of income. He gives them absolutely useless pieces of paper time and again. And when he does that, it's a lie that a boyfriend is telling his girlfriend. But what they do with it is they use it to increase their on credit lines, to get cards they're not eligible for, to have access to payday loans they shouldn't have access to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not only is he taking their money, but the truth is he is having them commit hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of financial crimes. Nobody seems to be talking about that part. But these women are committing crimes in the name of love.
Yeah. And so in order to I did notice that. So basically, I feel like, which, I mean, it is what it is. We're not making this up. It's what's out there. It's pretty not smart.
Well, I noticed that everybody's becoming famous off this. So the girls are all getting attention from this because they're sort of the protagonists that we're following, and they sort of set them up to be pretty weak character positions overall. Like they're just looking for love. They don't show them to be strong for coming forward as much as I think. I think they might be overplaying the hand of the girls. And these people are definitely victims of a con artist, but they're also committing their own crimes as this goes along. One of the most fascinating parts of this is he has come out and so he got banned from all these different social media apps in the last couple of days. He's only 31 years old today. He's living free in Israel. In spite of the fact that he's done jail time for different things, including, fraudulent ID. They estimate that he has swindled women out of between 10 and $15 million. But he is using this movie to say that he was a victim and that it was all acting on Netflix. And why won't they believe him? He is a con artist to his rotten core.
Well, you can tell that just from, just from what he did. Like, even if you only did that one time, you are, if he put his powers for good instead of evil. Okay. And when I say powers, I mean, like, think of the effort it takes.
Yes.
To like, you can hear it on the documentary. Like, he's having to basically turn himself into like the biggest asshole ever over and over again because he doesn't ever come clean with any of these women. Okay. They're just, gone. And so then they're left with, tons and tons of debt. And, in some ways, I would say, like, you don't have to tell the world everything you've done, especially when it's really, really bad, which I would say that, mortgaging your entire life to give money to somebody that you clearly don't know is really, really bad. And you shouldn't tell the world about it. But, they have, and their perspective is that they want to get his face out there so he can't continue doing it, which the way that the documentary sort of towards the end, he is telling the producers, because I assume they ask him for a comment, right? And he's telling them that he's going to sue them for defamation, except that's not really going to work because the way that they've done it is they've used clips of him talking like that he has sent these women. And so, like, there's really no faking that can happen there, right? It's video of him talking.
If they were, so the way that would work is he would have to sue the women. He couldn't sue the documentary filmmakers because all they have is the sources and the evidence.
I don't think that, but the point is he was saying to them, like, oh yeah, you proceed and do this and I'm going to sue you for, and he doesn't even say the word right, but like, he talks about what he's going to do. And, there, of course they like laugh and put the documentary out because like defamation has to be false information to begin with. And by all the evidence that's presented, it wasn't ultimately it wasn't law enforcement that did the investigation that led to him finally being arrested for something. It was journalists.
Yeah, journalists were fascinated by the story and they wanted to see if there was any proof. And the reason that these three women are the women that are used here is because the story is really about them in some ways. Because one thing they did that was really smart was they kept everything. They didn't delete the WhatsApp. They didn't archive anything. They kept all of the text messages, all the voice messages back and forth. And because this took place internationally, it's not like there was just a lot of talking on a cell phone. This was all being done through, video messages sent back and forth, audio messages sent back and forth. And you're able to watch it unfold because that's how it went. Plus, this guy's social media isn't even private.
Right. And so he had a template sort of set up for like, this is how I'm going to con the next girl. And the girls were comparing notes. And like, so he would send the same video to each one of them. And then he went step by step through the same process. Like every time, basically what would happen is one of the bodyguards that the girl would have met on several occasions was hurt. His enemies are after him, and they've frozen all of his accounts and shut down his credit cards. And so he needs his love, his girlfriend, his soon to be wife. He needs her to get him money, right?
Yeah.
And you know what I would have said in that type of situation?
Peace.
Well, let's say that I didn't want to just like completely blow the guy off, but I would say like, well, people live all the time without money. So why do you need so much money all of a sudden, right? Because I mean, he wasn't asking for like a couple $100. This was like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like, what does anybody ever need $100,000 for in a day? Like, unless you're buying a home, which, you need to get your shit straight before you do that, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like, just because when you live an extravagant life, like he had showcased to them, right?
Right.
As soon as you can't afford that extravagant life anymore, regardless of why, you stop living that life, right? Whether it's your enemies have attacked you and your assets have
you
been
make
frozen
adjustments. Yeah.
or whatever. And to me, I wondered like why they thought that they needed to be, fun. Now he did use guilt, right?
A lot of guilt.
I would have a lot of trouble feeling bad that I didn't give him hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just wouldn't feel bad about it. Like I don't live off hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. So, adjust, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Get off your private plane. And, like I said, he was throwing this money away. It was ridiculous what he was spending it on. And he had like girlfriends. I mean, it was insane what he was doing. Now, why do something like this?
So this guy, over the past 10 years or so, I started reading about Tinder swindlers. He's not the only one. Most of the time, they're doing it for sort of short-term scamming, but it's ultimately how they make their living. If he had done this in the United States, there's a lot of little things that apply. One of the things that's so interesting about this is it took place outside the United States and over multiple jurisdictions. And this guy is wanted under various names for various crimes. It's just not easy to prosecute any of them because the bulk of them are either fraud or financial crimes. The reason he does this is sort of the opposite of how he presents himself. This is him needing to feel powerful, but he's made it his job to do it this way. This is how he makes his living, supports he has apparently one child out of this at least that we see in the documentary. And she sort of becomes part of the con as well. The idea is he's placing himself in these weirdly vulnerable positions that he thinks will play. Like, it's almost like his template isn't just his crime and what he wants to get out of it. His template is the victim. He's going after a specific type of woman who is already vulnerable, but would be, because these women are kind of smart. In some ways, they're kind of smart. They're able to get, like you said, $100,000, $25,000. And he plays it just enough that they get a little something back where everything seems like it's going to be okay. And then he ups the ante, and the $25,000 is now $100,000. $100,000 is now $250,000. It is so fast in how it unfolds in the movie that I'm not sure how fast it unfolded in real life in each scenario, but it seems like it's unfolding over a number of months. Here's the thing. This guy doesn't know how to be a good person. Does that make sense?
That's the understatement of the century. Like, he doesn't even know how to be a neutral person.
It's so weird. And like, no matter how I look at it all, I I can't imagine being in either of these positions. I couldn't do that to people, but I would definitely not let people do this to me.
Well, and I think that's part of why I felt like, because at first I'm like I don't even like saying things out loud because I feel like as soon as I say it, like it's going to happen to me and I'm going to eat my words. But so typically, I'll watch something that comes on and, whatever, they got taken advantage of. And, everybody gets taken advantage of in some way or another at some point during their life. Right. Whether it's just, emotional manipulation or if it is financial or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And you learn from those experiences. Right. So I continued watching this as I watched this sort of unfold. And then they add another person and I'm like, wait, is that the same person? And it's not, it's another girl. They look very similar though. And then there's another person added. And I'm going, wait, and that, for the victims that are on the documentary, multiply that by 10. And that's probably, he's got a lot of victims out there, no question.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extreme. And I assume that, what I said earlier about don't tell the whole world what you've done. Like when you've done something really stupid, I assume that's why they all didn't come forward. And I don't blame them. It's almost like, I feel torn both ways because, like you said, I would never ever steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from because they're literally putting everything on the line for him to party, right?
Yeah.
And that is disgusting. But he's also not really. There's nothing to him without his,
this is his whole identity.
Right. But he's not overly handsome. He's not overly charming. He is pretty smart to be doing this, but he's kind of stupid to be doing this as well. Right.
Yeah.
So there's just not really much to him. And he gives his life meaning by doing this, except I believe that in whatever sense you want to say it, what goes around comes around. Right.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
If it's not true, well, oh well. But if that helps you be a better person and believing that what goes around comes around, you can. I feel like this has never crossed this guy's mind that what goes around might come around back on him, because why would you do anything anywhere close to what he's doing to anybody? And I feel like he may use some of the shame involved on the victim's end of this to keep them quiet, right? Which is where I would fall, honestly. I don't feel like I would do anything like this to some extent, because sort of in my life, my rule is I don't ever give anybody anything that I can't afford to lose. Okay.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, right?
Yeah, I fall in the same boat there.
And so I'm always happy to help somebody, right? It's just people don't pay you back and people don't return the favor. And I already know all this. And so when I help someone, it's not going to be in a way that's going to wreck me. It doesn't matter who they are. And I've been married for 17 years. So what do I know about Tinder? Well, not a lot, and nothing good from what I've seen so far. But I feel like maybe sometimes, maybe people don't think about the fact that even when you're dating someone that you trust and you realize, that they're really rich and it seems like they'll be able to pay you back, it really doesn't matter. You're not rich. You can't afford to lose what they're asking for. And you just have to say no, even if it does cost you the relationship, right? Which I feel like that's where it gets really messed up, is because this Ponzi scheme, it attacks people's hearts, right?
Yeah, it really does.
And it's so much different than just a normal investment Ponzi scheme. If you have some sort of rules laid out that help you make overall decisions, right? Don't put your hands on people. Don't ever let anybody borrow anything that you can't afford to lose. It helps you make bigger decisions more easily. And you could even just explain to the person, well, I can't afford to lose that much money and I don't ever let anybody I don't ever lend anybody anything I can't afford to lose. I'm sorry, I cannot help you, right?
Yeah, right.
They have to, I mean, these are adults, right? They have to deal with their own stuff. What is he going to say to me saying something like that? I mean, if he calls me names and stuff, like, I mean, I was very straightforward, right? I'm sorry, I can't help you. And, what do you say to that? Well, then you see the real person come out, right? I feel really bad for these women that they are in the position that they're in. And, I mean, I guess the GoFundMe is not that bad, but I don't know. I see, I don't know. I don't know what the solution to this is, because while, I want to be like, yeah, they should have to pay hundreds of $1,000s back. At the same time, like, that it is ruining their lives, I'm sure. So, like, what is the answer? Well, the answer was for him not to have done it, which, can't control that, or for them to have not done it, but they did, and it's already done. So,
well, I dug around. Do you have a lot more to say about the Tinder swindler? Because I want to talk to you about this other thing and see what you think of it. I dug around because it's just kind of that time of year where a lot of situations are coming up related to, I remember these being more like military scandals or Lonely Heart scandals, or kind of attacking the elderly and milking them for money. But one of the things I found comes out of the U.S. Justice Department, and it does relate a little bit to schemes and a couple. This is the U.S. Justice Department announcing that it seized $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin last week, recovering 94,000 Bitcoins that were stolen in a 2016 hack of the cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex. The feds arrested a couple they say were trying to launder the pilfered Bitcoin. So the current value of the Bitcoin is about $4.5 billion total. It would have been worth $70 billion not very long ago. It's a married couple. The guy's name is Dutch Lichtenstein. He's 34, and Heather Morgan, who is 31. They were arrested in Manhattan without incident Tuesday morning. So they thought they were basically using Bitcoin so it was safe and like it was anonymous. They weren't charged with stealing all of this Bitcoin, but they have been charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to commit wire fraud and to defraud under different sections of the U.S. Code. Right now, the magistrate set their bail at $5 million for Lichtenstein and $3 million for Morgan. They are not allowed to have access to the internet, and they must wear ankle monitors if they pay their bond. What in the world is going on that you steal and don't know what to do with $70 billion?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that one of the terms of their possible bail is they can't access the internet. That is crazy. I have opinions about cryptocurrency, and
well, generally, those opinions probably cross a lot of different financial lines for you, I'm sure.
They do. And, this type of situation, I don't actually know anything about this case. It sounds to me like people did lose, right? They lost money, and a lot of money. Now,
it came out of an exchange. It would be like kind of like stealing from a hedge fund a little bit.
Right. And so, obviously anything that's worth like 70 billion and now it's worth 4.5 billion, like let's, you could start there with what the problem is.
Well, Heather Morgan apparently has a rap career behind her. She goes by the stage name Razzle Khan and says that she's a rapper with a fearless entrepreneurial spirit and a hacker mindset. Now, Lichtenstein, he holds U.S. and Russian citizenship. They promote themselves on social media as cryptocurrency entrepreneurs. I always find that word interesting. But on his Medium profile, it says that he's a tech entrepreneur, explorer, and occasional magician.
Like now you see it, now you don't.
Yes. So Morgan talks on Forbes a lot, like on the Forbes contribution pages, and her bio says that when she's not reverse engineering black markets to think of better ways to combat fraud and cybercrime, she enjoys rapping and designing streetwear fashion. So this couple, I fear, is going to spend most of their Valentines in jail. So
Yeah, it sounds like it. I would like to know more about like what they actually did. It sounds like they're really, really smart. In fact, it sounds like they were too smart for their own good.
unfortunately, with this case, I don't think we'll ever know what they actually did. I say that because what the Justice Department has thrown out there from the original 2016 hack, I say this with all sincerity. I think that these people will not find themselves in prison. I think they will find themselves employed. But they basically stole 119,756 bitcoins, which resulted in a 20% nosedive in the price of Bitcoin because Bitfinex, the exchange, had to essentially freeze their customer accounts. And that's why I think these people will end up not going to prison at all. I think they'll end up with a job. We have one more couple to talk about here. You know, I've not ever. I've heard of big fraud cases, and I would say like the ones that I'm used to reading about are usually like Medicaid or, you know, where someone has defrauded like a government program that's related to offering some sort of services they didn't really offer, or duplicating, sort of taking advantage of the system.
Right. And, you know, since the government's inception, like basically this has been happening, right?
Yeah.
The problem, I think, I don't know exactly what the problem is. I think with some of the cases that we've seen recently, it's almost like we've emboldened the next generation to do it more openly. And I find it really interesting because this type of thing happens all the time, and it's just doing business, right? But when certain things start to fall out and unravel, you end up in basically this disaster zone, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, you've got lawsuits being filed and people being charged, and being investigated to be charged with more, and all kinds of stuff happening.
Yeah. And the place that I find it's sort of the easiest to these days to see how things go downhill. Well, I mean, you and I have always been in a pretty advantageous position to be able to look back and go, oh, this was their downfall, with various schemes and frauds that go on that get into the millions of dollars. But the most recent cases are almost entirely social media is where they fuck up. Social media is where they make their biggest mistake.
Actually, it's where they get caught.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because in the case that we're talking about today, like they were doing something wrong, right? And if they had posted on social media and they hadn't had these underlying things that they were doing wrong, it wouldn't have been as big of a deal.
Right.
And so, yeah, the mess up was, and so we're talking about a case of a married couple with a company that was founded in 2020. And it's Akbar Syed and Alea Sayaj.
Yeah, and they were a wedding photographer and a donut shop owner when this all started.
Right, and so they decided that they were going to set up pop-up COVID testing centers, and they acquired some of the funds that were being funneled from the government out, to be used for this. And they realized that they could get money to do this. And so they set up pop-up testing sites. Like, I think it was across the country.
In 26 states, in more than 300 locations, collecting 80,000 tests a day.
Okay. And so all of that, it was actually needed at certain points, it's probably still needed now, would be considered to be legitimate. The problem comes when they basically they were collecting test samples, they were charging the United States government and getting reimbursed for taking those samples, but they were just telling everybody their test was inconclusive or negative and that they needed to come back and take another test. And so that's where it all went wrong.
Yep.
Because they weren't testing anything, right? But they were getting money for not doing anything. Now, they were fast and loose about this because that they had employees, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so,
they had multiple companies that spawned from this.
And so, when you're telling employees, this is a serious thing to tell people that their COVID test is negative and have them continue their daily life while they're exposing people to it potentially.
Yep.
That's going to be not great, right? If it can be shown, right? Now, I would say if my employer said to me, "Oh, don't test it, just tell them it was inconclusive and to come back and take another test," I would probably be getting new employment, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't feel like I would continue doing that. But they basically saw this as a way to get money. And they exploited people wanting to know if they had COVID or not to their advantage. And now what you were saying was that social media, that's how they got caught. And I don't know exactly. I know that there were complaints made, but I know that it was brought to the attention of investigators that they were showcasing, their expensive house that they had bought and these expensive cars that they had purchased. And it was found that, the reason that they were suddenly making all this money was because of all the money they were getting from the federal funding that was issued for COVID tests.
Right.
And so, in this particular situation, they actually... it costs more to actually run the test, right? And if you run the test and it's conclusive, you don't have people coming back 2 or 3 times, right? If they had run it efficiently, they wouldn't have made so much money. And so it's kind of it's just a circular argument, really. But when the government gets exploited all the time. I mean, that's all that's really done all the time. That's how people make money. But you have to actually hold up your end of the bargain in order for it to not be fraudulent, right? So if they had successfully done all this testing, given accurate results, and they would have been entitled to money, to make money off of this. The problem was that they were using it just to make money. They weren't completing the act that they needed to be doing. And shame on them. That's really bad.
So here's the most recent article about it. It says lawsuits and investigations pile up against COVID testing company. This is run by just this couple. Okay. Washington State's Attorney General is the latest to sue the Center for COVID Control, alleging that it gave fake test results to patients and stored tests in trash bags, among other things. The Illinois-based Center for COVID Control, along with its partner, Doctors Clinical Laboratory, I mean, they couldn't get more generic than that, has been found to have more than 275 pop-up locations across the United States. Washington State's legal action comes about 2 weeks after Minnesota's Attorney General filed a similar lawsuit. Now, these lawsuits that are being filed for consumer protections. It also follows an inspection of the partner lab by the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS. And this information is coming from CNET, USA Today. It looks like multiple different Wall Street Journal articles are in here. And there's a Block Club Chicago article in the middle of all this. CMS found non-compliances and deficiencies at the lab, saying the lab was in immediate jeopardy after workers were observed not following procedures for rapid tests and after mistakes prevented tens of thousands of PCR tests from being processed. The FBI has also, this is what brought it to my attention, by the way, has also searched the Center for COVID Control's headquarters. That was the thing that I saw a search warrant press release, and I was like, wait, what? All Center for COVID Control locations will be closed until further notice, according to a statement on the company's website. During the pause, the company said it will train additional staff on sample collection and handling, as well as other best practices. The company advertises free at-home rapid and PCR testing. No one from the Center for COVID Control or Doctors Clinical Laboratory has currently commented to the press. There is a press release on the website from January, but it is when I went to click on it, it just takes me back to the pause page, and it's really just a couple of sentences there.
That company is not on pause. It is out of business.
I think so, but I looked at it really closely, and that was the reason I brought it up here and brought it to your attention, because I am going to follow it. Here's what was weird. They're still hiring.
Yeah, they may say that they are.
No. Let me rephrase my sentence. They are still actively posting jobs on the internet on different job sites within the last 2 days that lead me back here.
Well, and okay, so yes, that may be the thing. And depending on how much money they actually use to get sort of this idea going, which would be pop-up testing sites, which would actually be useful, right? They may have been bought, or it may have been they may have certain management changes occurring.
That is so polite.
Because, because if you think about it, like it sounds like when I say it fell apart because they weren't running the test, like that is exactly what it sounds like the problem was. It sounds like they weren't putting the money into actual like lab testing. And so that would mean that they had all the other stuff in place. Right. And so it would be kind of wasteful just to like shut it completely down. Now, I don't know what's happening there, but I assure you, actually, I don't know. People do this kind of thing all the time. The difference here is that they messed up. They messed up by not running the test. And then, they had more than, they let things sort of unravel because, when you're doing these tests, yes, of course, mistakes can happen. There's going to be some inconclusives, but like they weren't even trying. Like I think that they probably started out with good intentions, but then they realized it didn't really matter if they did the actual work or not. They could still get the money. If it had gotten to a certain point, they could have gotten away with it. The problem was they went too far. Right. So like if they had just 30 pop-up locations, we wouldn't be reading about this. Of course, they also wouldn't have, fraudulently obtained millions of dollars from the government. Right. Yeah. And so you've got to sort of balance it out. But the idea that they had was great. It's just like you shouldn't become millionaires off of that. Because so think about this for a second.
Not that quickly, at least.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I don't think you should become millionaires ever off of this particular venture because it's taxpayers' dollars that are funding it. Okay. And you need to, like, everybody needs to be right on budget, right? And it's not the kind of work that because there's not the investment that's being made is our tax dollars, right? The government has funded this. And so it almost needs to be handled by like not-for-profits, almost. But the money's there. And so it's a very thin line that you're walking on. And the novelty behind it is like, well, why would you do something that was so much work? Well, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't, right?
Right.
Because you're not
Right.
you're not going to be making a lot of money off of it. But I feel very confident in saying that if they had been doing all the work and they had done it efficiently, so not double charging for tests, not all this stuff that they're doing to kind of milk the system, they wouldn't have been making millions of dollars. Which that
I
makes
would
it
agree with
lose its
that.
appeal.
Well, so it's not. So to me, it's not that you can't ever become millionaires off doing something successfully and using government funds. What it is you should not have a Ferrari within 6 months of opening your business that's using government funds.
Well, I maintain that nobody should become millionaires off of the COVID virus in any way, shape, or form. And I know just, bear in mind, I get that pharmaceuticals are, that's kind of a different story, but whatever. The nature of, because what I'm saying is foregoing the actual work involved in getting the test done, it's dangerous in this COVID situation. The money put up to do these ventures, these testing sites, it's pretty budgeted out. And so what's being put in there, yes, somebody could make a salary doing it and somebody could make some money running it, right? But it's not going to be this extravagant amount of money. Now, with other things like military sewing contracts and I don't know, just about anything else the government puts out there, it is possible that you could make quite a bit of money off of it. But that's a completely different situation. The COVID, I feel like testing and making money to the detriment of people's health is really scary.
Right. I would agree with that. I just, I don't want to sound like I'm down on entrepreneurial stuff. It's this type of, you have to look it up. You can look it up on USA Today and just look up the Center for COVID Control. There'll be several different articles that'll pop up, but some of them will link you to videos of this $1 million mansion. And
they really skimped out on the house.
A couple of supercars. It's fascinating. But what is so interesting to me about all of this case, and the reason I'm bringing it up today, is so far, no one has been arrested.
Yeah, nobody's been arrested. And, I have my opinions about financial crimes, and a lot of resources are being used right now to investigate what's happening here, right?
Yeah.
And so you start with, the money was wasted. Lots of people didn't get the tests that they needed to have done, or they didn't get accurate results. Now there's all this waste happening, because I feel like it's a waste for everybody to have to be because the attorney generals of different states are having to sue them to make them stop doing what they're doing, or however it's working, right? Yeah. There's never going to be any sort of loophole that adds this all up to make it okay, ever. It's never going to be, it's not going to be, because if they could have done the work for if they could have done it exactly right and made this much money, why wouldn't they have just done that?
This is going to be a fascinating one. I cannot wait to see what else comes out of this.
I don't know if you remember or not, but back when the COVID kind of started, people were doing these crazy things buying up all the hand sanitizer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And, I was sort of watching, and people came after people doing that kind of thing. And, this guy, he had bought all the hand sanitizer he could get his hands on. And I think it was $15,000 worth of hand sanitizer that he had purchased. And he, he had turned around and he was going to sell it at it should have been liquid gold for what he was selling it for. Guy ended up being shamed into donating it. Right. So he lost the $15,000 he had spent on all this hand sanitizer. But he was like, you people don't understand. This was going to be a living for my family for the next year, a good living. And I'm going, right. but you've got all these people going without hand sanitizer. Like, you're not a hand sanitizer redistributor, right? You're just a guy. It escaped him. As the pandemic sort of took off, we had lots of things that suddenly we had real supply chain issues. You got to really figure out what mattered to you because of the supply chain issues, and they continue on even now. I would encourage everybody to not look to make a buck when other people are struggling. And
yeah, I would agree with that.
And I know that might sound like I'm up on my high horse, and maybe I am. What this couple did with the Center for COVID Control, even the name sounds shady, really. What they did was wrong. And if you really drill down and you think about, what's happening there, they put a price that, for them to have. They wanted money. And I have no doubt that they're responsible for people getting COVID and possibly even people dying from COVID. Because they wanted money instead of spending it on, testing to make sure that people had accurate results. So, would you want money at that cost?
No, but I don't really do things to maximize what money I'm going to get from them. I just try and have enough to just get by, and I'm okay.
But you're not going, but like, the reason to open COVID testing sites and to use government funds for that is to bring accurate results to people so they know what's happening to them. It's not to make money, right? Yeah. Now, it's not a glamorous thing to do, which is, again, where probably some of the the obviousness of what this couple was doing came into play, because they're stealing government funds to fund this lifestyle. I hate to say it, but a lot of things were wasted during COVID. A lot of stuff was wasted.
So if you hear the hesitation in my voice, it's because you're talking about it like it's past. It's still being wasted, in my opinion. I think a lot of this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, but we're not getting stimulus checks anymore.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that those resources have kind of been redirected, so to speak.
Right. Well, they didn't accomplish what they needed to accomplish to begin with. Okay.
Right. I agree with
that. And then it just, you're not going to have lawmakers continuing to, approve budgets when so many millions of dollars were put in for COVID tests to be out there, but yet you've got a lack of COVID tests everywhere and all the money's gone. So what happened to it? It wasn't just this couple, right? I mean, right. I don't know to what extent other people, because from everything I've read about this particular couple, they didn't even try. They weren't even trying to get people results. They said, well, just tell them it was inconclusive and have them come back and take another test so we can bill again for it, right? Which, that's straight up just Medicare and Medicaid fraud, right? Which is a huge thing. Not necessarily the medical providers, but the business managers of the medical practices. They go real deep in charging the government for money. And it actually, it's interesting because that has ramifications that pour over into the healthcare system, because you've got legitimate situations where people can't get paid because of these Medicare scams that are run. And it's just all a disaster.
Yeah, it is.
But I don't think COVID's over. I'm just saying, I think that
I'm saying I don't think the scams from COVID are over. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
And maybe it is. It seems like everybody's gotten wise to it, though. But I don't know. Maybe not, because I just, there's some very simple things that could weigh on. But I guess if you're that determined, I think that they could genuinely believe that they've done nothing wrong.
There's no way. You do not do some of the things that these people have done and think you've done nothing wrong. They literally said COVID money on their social media.
Right. You're right. So yeah, they must know that they've done something wrong. But why?
They bought a Lamborghini and a Ferrari and a Ford supercar.
And they said, like, oh, is that from oil money? And they're like, no, it's COVID money. And like, that's how blatantly honest. That makes me think that they may not know they're doing anything wrong.
I am. You're not wrong saying that. That's what makes this so crazy. Maybe you're not wrong, but that doesn't make it better.
Because if you thought you were doing something wrong, why would you say that? Right?
Oh gosh, I don't even know.
I mean, they're just blatantly honest. It's COVID money. It's all that COVID money we stole from the government. That's money straight out of our pockets.
I know.
And
I know.
Well, that, or it's just imaginary numbers. I'm just saying, but whatever you want to consider it as, it's unjust enrichment on their part for certain. And, they've been brought to light. And I do think, their downfall was they were doing something wrong. They got caught because of this elaborate, social media presence. I feel like if one of my friends on social media had said something like, oh, it's COVID money, I may have been taking a second look at that and being like, who can I call about this? Because, you don't ever want to be unjustly enriched in the times of crisis. It's not justifiable. It's never going to be justifiable. And, COVID sparked 9 new billionaires.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabbratiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabbratiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
Sunlight morning, early breeze, lovers daylight opening, windows whispering our names, inside this first light hideaway, a red September silver dawn, perfect photograph, quiet song, resting in each other's arms, with galaxies of fallen stars, hearts beat in unison, eyes wide open, two like one. Love won't lead us apart. We've come too far, and right now the sun is ours. Let the tides come and go, every moment an afterglow, your side. Your beauty leaves me mystified. Breathing in the quiet air, untold stories still to share. You're the flame inside my heart. Love like two eternal sparks. Hearts beat in unison. Eyes wide open, two like one. Love won't lead us apart. We've come too far, and right now the sun is ours.